Hey, and I see Shasta Kearns-Moore has joined us. Welcome, Shasta. Shasta will be taking Les's place once his term is over. We were discussing that a short while ago. And we've come to the decision that based on the interpretation from the governor's office, Les's term goes to the end of the year, after which Shasta will join the PRAC in his place. So Shasta, does that sort of conform to your thinking on this as well, or what you've been told?
No, but
okay.
I mean, it definitely is fine with me. And it's kind of what I assumed was going to happen. But then I was told a few days ago that it started like as soon as the Senate vote was done. And I was like, oh, okay.
Well, you know, I'm certainly no expert on this, and I've too have been relying on what I've been told. I am more than happy to welcome you at this time if Les wanted to step back. I think it is open to interpretation, so I don't really want to choose for you two how you want to proceed.
No, I'm perfectly content to let Shasta. I mean, it makes perfect sense to get her involved at the beginning of these discussions instead of halfway through. You know, and I can continue on just as an interested observer, or I can check out as a group prefers.
Well, Les, from my perspective, you're more than welcome to stay and offer your opinion as an honored guest and former member of this PRAC. We always value what you have to say, so I'd be happy to keep you in this meeting if you want to stay too.
Sure, unless you start yelling at me, then I'll probably exit.
Well, I've had lunch, so I'm not hangry, so we'll probably be okay. Yeah. Well, Shasta, then welcome to the PRAC and welcome to your very first subcommittee meeting. This is the non-legislative subcommittee. Welcome, Adam. I see we have you now as well. So we're only missing Tony and we're already at quorum. Steve, I see you mentioned that the potential framework document is not working, my attempt to share it. So when we get to that document, I will just share my screen and show it to everybody so they know what I'm talking about. So let's dive in here. You have your agendas handy. So the first step is approving today's agenda. Do I have a motion from anybody?
So move. Oh wait, I can't. Never mind.
The old habits die hard, Les. You know what? I'm blowing through this here. Let me just do a quick run through the agenda real fast for everybody, especially those that may not have it in front of them. The first item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. The second item on the agenda is motions from council members to add additional agenda items. The third item is establish subcommittee rules of procedure. The fourth item is review duties and obligation to report findings to the full council. The fifth item is to review spreadsheet of approved non-legislative actions. The sixth item is to have public comment period from anyone regarding these non-legislative action items that we will be discussing. Sixth item, or the seventh item on the agenda, will be to choose and prioritize actions for further development and presentation of these items to the full council. And finally, we'll conclude with setting a schedule and assignments for next steps as per the actions that we choose to work on. So that having been said, do you have any questions or a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. This is Molly.
Thank you, Molly. Seconded?
Using Robert, so seconded.
Thank you, Adam. Agenda approved. Moving on, do we have any motions from council members to add additional items to today's agenda?
No.
Hearing none. Let's move into establishing subcommittee rules of procedure. You know, we just had the legislative subcommittee meeting last week, and effectively what that subcommittee chose to do is adopt the PRAC's general rules of procedure, and to clarify that a simple majority of subcommittee members represents a quorum for purposes of our subcommittee meetings, and also that this recording will serve as the record for the subcommittee unless anybody wants to volunteer to take minutes. I'm not necessarily advocating that anybody does, but if you wish to step forward and do so, please virtually raise your hand. Otherwise, I would open up the issue to any discussion, or otherwise we can move to a motion. All right, no volunteers and no questions. So does anyone have a motion regarding adopting the PRAC rules of procedure, clarifying a simple majority represents a quorum and that this recording will be the official record of this meeting?
Thank you. I wondered if I might be able to make a friendly amendment on that. And in any instance where those two things aren't covered, we just use Robert's Rules of Order for that sort of thing. So for those of you who aren't procedure nerds like me, that means seconded motions and otherwise just a normal.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I would normally sort of default to my basic understanding of Roberts anyway, but I appreciate that clarification. So as amended by Adam, do we have a motion? Maybe from Adam.
I move the PRAC proceedings requiring quorum being established as a majority of subcommittee members. The motions have to be seconded. The recording shall function as the meeting minutes, and that anything that isn't covered by the previous three items is covered by Roberts.
Thank you. Second?
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion passed. I realized we didn't actually have a vote on approving the agenda earlier. So let's back up for a second. All in favor of approving the agenda we've already adopted?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, the agenda is adopted. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so let's move into the spreadsheet of approved non-legislative items. I put that link in the chat if you don't have it available. And I'm just going to bring it up for myself as well. As you might recall, or as you could see from what you have in front of you, it covers a pretty wide range of potential issues that this subcommittee can take up, flesh out, and propose to the full council that we continue working on it. Steve Suo and I met recently in preparation for this meeting, as he is the vice chair, to discuss the agenda and framework, and we came up with this idea of encapsulating these ideas into essentially 6 potential frameworks under which we can then sort of flesh out how we want to work these through further. I see someone doesn't have access to the document, so I'm going to just provide them here. Oh, thank you, Adam. Adam provided the non-legislative objectives that were previously approved by the full committee that I'm now addressing. There's this new document of the potential framework that I'd like to break these issues down to that has not been effectively shared. So I'm going to share my screen now to show everybody what I'm talking about and see if we could sort of craft our conversation around these potential ideas. Once I get to it. Sorry, everybody, one moment. Are you guys seeing, what do you guys see now? My computer screen?
Seeing your teams.
Just Teams. Okay, no, sorry. I will swap that. Come on. Let me try this and now go to, geez.
Now we see your browser. Oh, there. Well.
Right, it came up. The potential.
Yeah, I think that's the right one.
Okay, great, thank you. So, yeah, like I said, so we ran through the non-legislative objectives, used Steve's previous document that attempted to create categories for all these disparate ideas, and then we broke that down further to this document of potential conceptual frameworks under which we could place all the ideas that have been approved so far and start building from there. I'm going to do a quick run through to briefly discuss them to the extent I understand them. I welcome Steve or anyone else to jump in to help flesh them out. but and some of them may not apply to our work or may not really be very large action items that we could deal with quickly. But so the first one is fact gathering, essentially using the PRAC as a fact-finding body, requesting that other public bodies come before us to discuss their public records practices, and that can be used to gather data about how public bodies process public records requests, what kind of resources they do or do not have available, or for really specific things like, for instance, how certain agencies at the state and local level, perhaps the largest ones or the ones that were most involved with the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, handled public records requests during that period. Because remember, we're not necessarily trying to propose legislation here, but rather gather data to improve public records practices and perhaps inform the work of the other subcommittee when it's developing legislative concepts. The next potential framework would be exemptions. Does the PRAC want to tackle those in any way, including, as had previously been suggested, perhaps diving deeper into the 5 most commonly used or the most troublesome exemptions and offer some suggestions around that? I will say the Sunshine Committee met yesterday for the first time in quite a long time, and they very strongly and clearly doubled down on their mandate that their main work, the main body of work they're supposed to be focusing on, is processing all of these exemptions. There was processing these exemptions and making recommendations to the legislature about it. They had extensive discussion about whether any overlap existed between the Sunshine Committee and the PRAC, and as they discussed it amongst themselves, it became clear that there certainly is the potential for overlap because the Sunshine Committee is charged with doing more than just looking at exemptions and could take up other issues of relevance, just like the Public Records Advisory Council's, although it's now charged with overseeing my office, it has other statutory duties as well, obviously in the realm of public records, but they concluded with the fact that their main charge is working through these exemptions and coming up with recommendations to the legislature. And so, you know, I think anything that we choose to do in this realm, if we want to go under this framework, we should be very careful not to duplicate their work and maintain the information sharing that Mark asked Michael to establish between our 2 committees. The next item is a resolution regarding annual meeting to assess and set goals for the coming year. This is something just really that this subcommittee can quickly vote on and report back to the full council about this idea that the PRAC just met for the first time recently after the passage of the bill that made the Advocate's Office independent and gave the PRAC full oversight over my office, but also then established these subcommittees and these goals to work on for the foreseeable future, and that it might be worth suggesting to the full council that we return to this concept every year, that the PRAC has an annual meeting and sort of goes over what it accomplishes, reviews these goals, and decides what it wants to continue with or how it wants to move forward for the coming year. You know, these annual meetings are often larger, they go on for a longer amount of time, but would set our path for the coming year. And all that's really being suggested for today's meeting is that we vote to see if that's something we're interested in as a recommendation we make to the full council. Okay, the 5th potential conceptual framework then is something around public body awareness. For instance, how does the PRAC help public bodies at the state and local level remain aware of their obligations under the public records law, as well as fulfilling the spirit and not just the letter of the law when processing public records requests, building policies, investing in technology systems, hiring staff, etc. And one area that we discussed is perhaps the PRAC working on coming up with model policies for public bodies, model public records policies for public bodies. I often use DAS's public records policy and fee schedule in my training, not because it's binding on any of these public bodies that I train outside of the state, but I consider it a very detailed, well thought out policy with that kind of like hits all the marks it's supposed to under the law. And a lot of public bodies don't have anything close to that. And as I think I've explained in the past, I've interpreted the mandate of my office to include helping public bodies either design or update their policies. But just because of the resource limitations on my end, I have not had the ability to create a model policy for anyone that is so often sought. And it seems like maybe this subcommittee is the perfect place to make that happen faster than my office could, or somehow work with my office to make that happen. And that's just one idea of, fostering public body awareness. And Oh, I blew right past requester awareness, everybody. Sorry about that. That's the flip side of the coin, of course. Working with requesters, members of the media and the community at large to raise awareness about their rights, duties, and abilities under the public records law. And this is a good point to let you all know that I'm already working on a project along these lines, specifically. Hold on, sorry, I have to admit some people. Okay. Specifically, I am working with the attorney from the Reporters Committee and IT staff from the Secretary of State and now the State Law Library, as well as the Department of Justice, to build a database of as many public records orders from county DAs as possible. I didn't know until recently that part of the raft of legislative changes that occurred in 2017 included that all county DAs are supposed to send their public records orders to the Attorney General. And right now, the Attorney General has not, really undertaken much to publicize those decisions they receive. In essence, they were given the mandate to receive these orders, but not necessarily do anything with them. And so in conjunction with Ellen Osenak, the Reporters Committee attorney, we've decided to build a public-facing searchable database on the Public Records Advocates website that will feature as many orders as we can. DOJ has agreed to send us these orders regularly. We probably have something approaching 80 orders from the last 3 years at this point, and we're working with all these partners to find the appropriate technological solution to get those orders up on the website. But there are certainly other things that we could choose to focus on to raise requester awareness, whether it's a technological solution, a training solution, better publicity about some of the things going on in the public records world. But this is just another category that we could choose to work from. And then finally, the sixth category we came up with was yes.
Excuse me, I just noticed that Molly has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading this document, so I can't see hands. Molly, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. So I just want to make sure I understand. What do we mean by orders?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm no inside baseball here. So just like the Attorney General, for local public bodies, it's the county district attorneys who process and decide public records appeals, and then issue orders along the lines of that the Attorney General does for state agencies. So there's 36 DAs, right? 36 counties. They've been litigating public records appeals for years, and until 2017, those orders just stay with the county DAs. And so even for interested requesters or public bodies that weren't subject to that order within a county, they're not aware of their local precedent when processing public records requests and deciding how to figure out difficult situations, whether it's fees, exemptions, what have you. Multnomah County is the only county that regularly publicizes their public records orders and does so in like a very neat, orderly fashion. The other 35 counties don't, except now they have to send their orders to the district, the Attorney General. My understanding is about half of the counties are doing it, so we're probably not looking at getting orders from all counties when we build this database, although we do intend to reach out to all county DAs except for Multnomah County and say, hey, we're doing this. Are you willing to participate? Will you just send your orders directly to us? Or maybe just, start sending them to the AG, who will then forward them on to us to include in our database. And just like an AG's public records order, DA orders can also be appealed to the court in that county if either the requester or the public body disagrees with the outcome. Does that help,
Gotcha.
Molly?
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I probably should have explained that at the outset. So yes. And then the final category is transparency by design, which has been discussed at length, or is something of, I think, a great interest to all of us. And that includes things like these examples I've put in this document, like making sure public bodies are not inadvertently erecting barriers to disclosure. Again, that could be improving or creating better policies for them. It could be things like making sure that when they institute new technology systems, that they automatically segregate personally identifiable information or other currently exempt information. Some public bodies have really specific exemptions they work with, and it's not always easy when you're purchasing off-the-shelf systems to process public records requests to build in these unique features that help your work but doesn't necessarily apply to others. But it's certainly something we could try to expand on and explore that concept. And then along those same lines, working with public bodies when they're doing their budgeting process or what have you, and I'm sorry, I mean state and local public bodies, to make sure that they're advocating for allocating adequate resources up front, baking transparency and thus accounting for costs into their systems at the outset rather than just utilizing their ability to recoup actual costs after the fact by passing it on to the requester. So this is the generalized framework that we're suggesting that we consider working from to sort of pull in all the concepts that have already been approved, deciding how much of this we think we could take on and how we want to flesh out, details within any or all of these frameworks to then suggest back to the council. So that's where my understanding is at this point, and I'd love to hear from other members what they think about utilizing this framework or anything else that we've discussed so far.
So this is Adam. I think it's a helpful framework to kind of start from. The one thing that I'm thinking about as I look at these 6 things is like any one of these things could be a place where we all just really try to dig in on. I might suggest either selecting 1 or 2 of them and trying to keep focused so we don't try to boil the ocean on this one.
Yeah, I have to say, Adam, I wholeheartedly agree. And at least Steve and I overlap with the legislative subcommittee, and they've actually, decided on a pretty large slate of things that we're going to focus on and try to build out over time. I think that's going to be very time consuming. I think it's going to take up a lot of focus of the councils, which is great. It's important work that sort of really gets to the heart of what this council was created for. So I'm kind of in agreement with you that I think we sort of should pick like 1 or 2 major concepts, figure out how we want to develop them and move on from there. Les, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I agree with narrowing the focus. I think as you look at these 6, look at the ones that have the broadest impact. In other words, will have the greatest impact on improving disclosure. And for my money, that comes from combining 4 and 5, helping people better understand the law and how to apply it, and for the requesters and for the public bodies, again, how to apply it and what their obligations are. I mean, if that's all this subcommittee did is design a framework to accomplish that, that would be applicable across the state and among government agencies of every size. So that would be my recommendation.
One potential way to do that, to accomplish both of those missions in one, is a model policy. That the flip side of that is sort of model requests for people that hit all the things that the policies sort of say public bodies are supposed to do, but also what a public body needs to know from a requester in order to actually adequately process that request and avoid any confusion at the outset. And we could put in things about the importance of communication, etc. So I do like that idea. Anybody else? Shasta says she likes focusing on model language. And of course, Open Oregon has a model letter that they have available for requesters that I helped edit at some point in the past. So we could help maybe build on that previous work as well, or see how we want to update or expand it as well. Okay, look at us. We're at 1:30 and we're already all in agreement. Steve.
I did want to say just observe that the fact gathering, and maybe that fits into other categories. In any case, we're obviously going to be gathering facts, but the kind of the deliberate effort of trying to find out what the current state of affairs is at public bodies. It was a pretty widespread ask of members of the PRAC, so it feels like that, and maybe that's as simple as guiding the creation of a new survey, but we also talked about the possibility of bringing people in to testify, to like kind of ask pointed questions about how they do things and what their track record has been. So
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
That one.
No, that can even be used in well, first of all, I don't think any of these ideas are going in the trash. It's more a notion of like what do we want to focus on first. But fact gathering, like as an initial foray into that field, could be used to inform the model policy that we create. and things like that. For instance, DAS, under the public records law, if you find a public interest in a request, you may offer a fee waiver reduction, but as I understand it, DAS's policy for the agencies that fall under it is they shall or must offer a fee waiver or reduction. And, that's a policy decision. It's well within what the law permits in terms of interpretation. And we may wish to offer certain advice like that too. Like you can do this, but we're saying, we recommend that you should do this under certain circumstances, but how would we really adequately say that without hearing from the agencies at the state or local level that might be affected by this model policy if they adopt it? So that might be how we get started with fact finding, sort of get our feet wet, and then realize, okay, and now that we've come up with this model policy, it's out there, we want to now do fact finding on the next issue and the next issue and so on and so forth. The Sunshine Committee, for instance, had incorporated a PII subcommittee that then I think did bulk data, and now they've decided to leave it as a standing committee, sort of like the next issue subcommittee, that they'll just keep sending issues to as they come up or that are next in line. And I very much see us as a similar body because we could tackle these one-on-one or one at a time or what have you, and then like sort of move on to the next once we feel like we've gotten to a good place with the previous concept. So maybe we do this. Why don't we poll the members we have? We're not too many to sort of narrow down where we want to focus. And then before we move to any sort of vote or decision making, I'd like to hear from any non-members who are in this meeting and what they think. So would anyone like to start? I mean, we've kind of already done that a little bit. Les, are you satisfied with what you said about where we should focus, kind of the flip side of better understanding of the law for the public and public bodies, or would you like to expand on that?
No, I think the point's made that based on my experience, much of the conflicts over public records is not so much deliberate violations as ignorance, and so I just see that as crucial to dialing down the number of appeals and petitions and confrontations that are needed, and in turn you're speeding up disclosure when public bodies understand what their obligations are and when they ought to be disclosing. So I'm good.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and it would actually be very helpful in my work as the advocate too, because like I said, I get a lot of asks about policies. So to have a model policy or a model like letter, to request records that I could just offer to people as soon as they ask would be very helpful. I could put it up on the website. I often provide my slides in advance or after a training. I can include these model policies and request letters with those trainings as well. So I think it could really sort of up the game on the information I'm providing too. So I like it. Okay, who else would like to share, sort of their priorities here? And I realize we've all kind of spoken, but let's just go through and kind of formally get these down.
So this is Adam again. I'm with Les. I think if we took some more time to really think through the process from both the requester side and the requestee side, I think that's worth its weight in gold right there. So that's probably where I'd like to spend the most time.
Thank you, Adam. Steve, Molly, or Shasta? I realize we're double dipping with Les and Shasta, but like I said, Les is an honored guest and we're happy to hear from him.
This is Molly. Yeah, this all sounds good to me. It seems like there, maybe like this thing about annual meeting is something that could be just sort of checked off. I mean, I don't know. Does that really need a long, conversation? I don't know. I would just be a fan of like, if there's some low hanging fruit here, like let's take care of that, and then recognize that the long term goals, will may or may not include sort of the ideas that are included here. So whether it's whether state agencies are coming to us and using us as a resource or not, isn't something that needs to happen in the next 6 months. But, any work we do now helps, build the credibility of the PRAC. And so, I think, the orders thing just like that just sounds so cool. And it's something that, that the PRAC can take credit for and, really be able to demonstrate, doing some work. So I don't know if that's very helpful or not, but I guess I would just say I'm fine with any approach and any combination of these things, but would like to see us do sort of both the short term, here, what could we get done in a year, and then sort of what's the longer term stuff. And maybe that's part of what having a yearly meeting is doing the, big picture strategic visions type conversations.
Thanks, Molly. Our annual report to the legislature is due at the end of next year, and I really do think we could get some sort of along the realms of public awareness and public body awareness project off the ground, whether it is these model policies and letters or something else. I do think with the number of people we have here and the commitment to these few ideals that we can really have something in the report by the time the report is due. Steve, Shasta, I would love to hear from you guys as well.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think that even when I first got involved in these issues in 2017, we were looking for model policies. So that's kind of been a long-standing interest of mine, and something that I've often thought that there should be something out there that's, like we're not the only people trying to invent the wheel here. So I think that's a great idea, but I also really like transparency by design, and but I don't see them as mutually exclusive. And if we're looking at model language, seems like we would also be looking at model policies in that aspect too. So as far as educating the public and that kind of thing, I mean, I think that kind of, if the policies.
You cut out, Shasta.
I guess, yeah, I guess I would kind of advocate for our focus being on model policy and model language.
Okay, great. We did lose you for a minute there.
No,
so I'm not sure if we missed anything you said. No, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's possible if we feel like if we're not biting off more than we could chew, a model policy could even include like an optional data management section or something like that that talks about the technological side of receiving, processing public records requests as well. Something to keep in mind. Great. Mr. Suo?
Yeah, I think I support everything that's been said. I think this list makes sense if, I think we're talking about knocking off number 2 and number 3 and call them done by us or another body, and keeping the rest of the list, but prioritizing in the near future numbers 4 and 5, with fact gathering being a kind of inherent part of that process of developing a plan for requester and public body awareness. So it sounds good to me.
And I'm just going to say ditto to what Steve said, because that was my thinking as well. So before we entertain any motions here or kind of decide what we want to do next, I would love to hear any input from anyone else in this meeting who's not a member of the subcommittee. Your thoughts on this process and what this subcommittee should be focusing on.
So, hello all, this is Gail Snow. I'm a fairly recent records program manager for the Port of Portland, and I'm new to the public records world in Oregon. And so I'm really interested in the expertise in this group, and I love the idea of a model policy. We do have some policy structure at the port that I'm sure needs to be updated. But like one of the things you mentioned was that the Multnomah County attorney had posted orders, and I'm not quite sure where those could be found.
Well, that I could pull up right now and drop in the chat if you'd like, but also please feel free to email me offline, because I'm happy to walk through these issues with you.
Resources. Yeah, because I'm sure that there is a plethora of resources available out there that could help me do this part of my job better, but I'm just not as familiar with them as I should be. So, oh, that would be lovely. I've visited the site, and so I know where to refer folks to if they do want to submit an appeal, but actually seeing decisions come out, there they are.
Oh, you have it?
I see the website that you're showing, Public Records Order Index. That's awesome.
I didn't realize I was still sharing my screen. Sorry. Glad I tried to shop for pants on J. Crew.
There's nothing there.
If I might cut in for just a second, Gail, I'm sorry. I was going to ask Todd, is the port actually a state agency? Or actually, I should ask you, Gail, is the port a state agency?
Oh, go ahead, Gail.
Well, well, I don't know. I don't know under the public records law what we're considered, but like under the records management side, like under the retention groupings, we're considered county and other entities. So.
Right, Gail, so any appeal of your public records decisions would go to the county, wouldn't they? That's why you're interested in Multnomah County?
Yep, to Multnomah County. Yep.
That's what I thought. Okay, great. Yeah. Well, I will actually just provide the link in addition to showing everybody my screen. I'll drop it in the chat, but yeah, please, I appreciate your input and thank you very much for that. But also please do feel free to reach out to my office even anytime soon, because I could walk you through the resources that are out there. I could review your existing policy and we could just have a general chat about public records issues if you'd like.
I would love that so much.
Yes. My website is just oregon.gov/PRA.
Fantastic.
And yeah, I'm more than happy to talk, but also thank you so much for your input today.
Oh, thanks for allowing me to listen in. This is very helpful.
You're welcome. And welcome to the public records world.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Would anybody else like to share today?
Can I ask a total noob question, which is, so if this is the non-legislative subcommittee, is model policy really what we're talking about, or is that what the legislative subcommittee is talking about?
No, this is for us. The legislative committee is focused on developing like literally legislative concepts to propose to the legislature, probably through our two ex officio members who are members of the House and the Senate. That's the usual vehicle or direction through which we submit legislation. But yeah, we're focused here on everything non-legislative, figuring out how to further the reach of the PRAC, to help others, to get the word out about the spirit and state of the public records law, essentially. And also, I think some of this work could ultimately end up informing the work of the legislative subcommittee or the full council about which legislative concepts they want to propose.
Mm-hmm. So, figuring out model like executive branch policy, that's something that we could do.
Sure, absolutely. Because, this body only has the ability to suggest changes, whether it's through policy or practice or the law. And of course, this body also exists to oversee and assist my office. So some of these tools that we develop here, like I said, might be adapted by me and eventually a deputy in our work with public bodies and records requesters as well. So we kind of have a broad mandate. Steve.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I guess I'm thinking of this model policy idea. It's really, it could be broader, more like, guidance from the PRAC, like best practices. Maybe it's not like, copy this policy and adopt it institutionally with, city council approval or something like that. But maybe it's something, it's like, here are 10 things you should do and 10 things you shouldn't do. It could be as simple as that. I did want to say, Gail, I wanted to mention many years ago, I was when I was a reporter, I covered a very bad accident at PDX, and it involved some construction that was going on there. And I want to say within a week after our request, the port had set up a reading room for us to read all the contracts and all the construction documents and the correspondence with the contractor. And if you want to talk about kind of model conduct, definitely was there.
Well, that certainly was before my time. So now I know I have there's a high bar I need to maintain. So, but that feels good. And I kind of like the suggestion about like certain best practices, like things we're grappling with right now is like our police department is getting ready to implement body cam footage, and we want to come up with a policy of when we release that and when we don't, even though there's a state law that says we don't have to. We want to be as transparent as we can, considering our resource requirements. And we also struggle with things like trade secrets. And does anybody else have a strategy for coping with that appropriately? And those would be beneficial for us.
Yeah, those are definitely weighty issues that you're dealing with. And yeah, I stand ready to assist where I can. And perhaps if the Port of Portland is interested, you could perhaps be the first public body that comes before us to talk about your practices to inform our work, if that fits with what we ultimately decide to do moving forward. But either way, the advocates' resources are always available to you as well. Okay, do we have comment from anybody else at this time? And Gail, just so you know, Leela from DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, is saying that they also struggle with trade secrets, and she'd be happy to chat sometime with you.
I'd love that. Wonderful.
Okay, well, thank you for the comments we received. If I'm not wrong, I think now would be the time for a motion. Well, maybe we should talk that a little more. Do we want to sort of work together? What I'd like to see is we'll come to an agreement about what are the concepts we're going to focus on now moving forward. And then I think we should decide how much do we want to flesh this out before we present it to the full council in December. And also, do we think we need to meet again before that happens to sort of do more of that work, or get this going, hand it back to the full council, have sort of a group discussion about what that means, and then take it back and keep running with it based on what the full council decides. I'm of the idea that we, based on all the input we received so far, vote on our top concepts and then discuss about what we want to do more before the December meeting, if anything, or how we want to present what we came up with. So what does everybody think?
We're unlikely to be able, we're not going to meet again before the December PRAC meeting, right? So
is it December 9th? Let me see. I'm just going to confirm.
Yeah, I think it is, because it's my birthday. And I remember thinking, oh, I get to spend my birthday with you all.
Oh, we'll have to remember to sing happy birthday then.
Shit. Shut.
Well, that wouldn't even work, because with Zoom or with Teams, you'd only hear one of us singing, and that's definitely not going to be me, because I don't want to make your birthday worse.
Thank you.
I guess I'd be in favor of reporting something back to the PRAC. It seems to make sense. I wanted to bring something else up with the risk of prolonging things a little bit. I did want to talk a little bit about this idea of specifically of a survey, like Ginger McCall did and you did. Was it 2-3 years ago?
Yes, I guess it came out in 2019.
And we've attempted to kind of institutionalize that through legislation. That failed for various reasons, but we still have the ability to do voluntary surveys like that. I mean, we had pretty good participation, right? Like 70% or something.
I mean, if you averaged out all the different types of public bodies, it's probably more like, yeah, 65, 70%, probably closer to 65%.
I just wondered, because it did come up a number of times when we were talking about agenda items for non-legislative, I wonder, like, is do you have plans to do that? Like if that's not a PRAC priority, do we need to take that on if we want to make it happen?
I would say yes. Wearing my advocate's hat, that I think the PRAC should take it on. First off, I'm in the process of a lot of things that would make it very difficult for me as the advocate to undertake that. I hope to be onboarding a deputy soon. I'm going to be visiting different offices, exploring real estate options for the future of the office where it will be located. My own position is in the process of being reclassified. The requests for assistance are not slowing down. There are still public body trainings happening, although they're not at an excessively large rate. But just the general reality of the situation is, having been the person who sort of, carried most of the water on that previous survey, it's incredibly important, but it's also incredibly time consuming. And my office does not have the ability to see it through right now. And I think it will require a lot of attention over an extended period of time to make it happen. Also, the survey represented a snapshot in time of a choice number of state and local public bodies that gave us a picture of where they were at in that moment, but that's one data point. How do we, even two data points, they make a line, not a pattern. So how would we structure a survey or surveys adequately to start building up a useful data set to continue using moving forward, rather than just getting these snapshots in time that can be helpful, but eventually I think kind of become stale if we don't continue refreshing this information. I would like this information to get to us and everyone else who could use it, whether it is eventually a legislative mandate that we manages to get passed, or we come up with some sort of repeating process by which we target all or some public bodies. But I think it would be a huge lift, and it's not something my office is capable of sort of taking on, in not in its entirety, then most of it. So we would just really have to work hard to figure out a way to do that. And so maybe getting started with these concepts, kind of flexing our muscles with a fact-finding ability or fact-gathering ability as a committee, will help us figure out what that framework could look like for maybe round 2 or round 3 or what have you. Because if we're going to do it, I just want to do it in a way that's sort of sustainable and builds a pattern and expectation moving forward. If that makes sense. I think Molly has her hand up.
Yeah, so, one thought that occurs to me is that the Secretary of State's Audits Division did an audit of public records policy in 15 or 16. I can't remember exactly when that was. And it wasn't every single agency, but there were, it was a pretty wide swath. And, given the Secretary's role as, a member of the PRAC, and I'm here as their designee, I would be happy to talk to audits about if there is a plan in the works to update that, or to go back and, I don't have a good sense of what's in the audit schedule for the next year or two, but I feel like there would be a compelling case to ask, to see if we can do an update or something, just to make sure that we've got more information, and, we're not starting from scratch. There was a very comprehensive audit that made lots and lots of recommendations. I have no idea what has been followed through on or what hasn't. So I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole on this or anything, but if folks are amenable to it, I would be happy to talk to our audits division about that report and any future updates.
Yeah, Molly, that seems like a great idea to me, and perhaps utilizing that previous audit, the PRAC survey, and then any future surveys, audits, fact gathering, et cetera, we could essentially do something of like a meta-analysis. Given all the information we have so far, by combining all those different things, what does that tell us about the state of the system, and how do we want to move forward based on that to continue gathering this information, or something like that? So yes, please do ask. And report back at your convenience on that. So Steve, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I understand the overhead it takes. But I guess I'd be interested in hearing from others, though, really, how important they feel that form of fact gathering is.
Yes, everybody, what do you think?
So from my perspective, when I initially, oh, sorry, Les, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Adam.
I actually used the PRAC survey in testimony, I think in 2021. I guess the most interesting thing to me was kind of the number of survey or number of public records requests given to agencies, how much we charge, those sorts of things. I think this committee knows, or this group knows, that we as DAS are in the process of putting together a public records management system that would be a process or a way agencies can otherwise utilize a system through which basically ticket their public records requests and make sure that we were able to are obviously meeting all the statutory requirements, but are able to do so as effectively and efficiently as possible and communicate better with those requesters. So there's certainly some stuff there that can be done, but from my perspective, some of the model language conversation and like how best to work this process is, I think, where I'm excited about this group's work.
Hey, Adam, if you know, will that system have the ability to track public records requests so that it builds this data over time? And if so, will that be a required feature of the system?
Yep, to both. So really,
so at least oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, we're still in the process of coming up with the RFQ, but yeah, that's definitely one of the things we need to work on.
Okay, great, thank you. Les.
Well, I want to just piggyback on your remarks, Todd, about resources, and frankly remind everyone that the members of the council also have limited resources, i.e. time being one of the most critical resources that anybody has. And I would just strongly encourage the group to winnow this work list down to one or two immediate graspable goals. I mean, these ambitions are all terrific, right? But ambitions that aren't accomplished aren't really any sort of a success. And so I encourage narrowing down the list, focus on one or two things that part-time volunteers can actually dig into with some substance to get something done in something less than 2 years. And with that, I wish you good luck with it all.
Thanks, Les. We expect public commentary from you in the future as we come up with ideas. Okay, well, unless anyone else wants to share their thoughts, I think it might be appropriate to move toward a motion about what we're going to focus on as one motion, and then how to proceed as the next, unless it's simplistic enough that we combine them into two. And what I am proposing is, based on all the feedback I've heard so far, that today as a group we could move to recommend to the full council that we have an annual meeting to explore the concepts and work done so far in the previous year, and to refocus or reframe or reemphasize the work that we want to do in the coming year, and that the PRAC should do this annually. And second, that the current focus of the subcommittee would be to further develop concepts about how we can better help both the public and public bodies understand both the spirit and letter of the public records law. And the focus of that concept would be developing a model policy that can be utilized by state and local governments, and also model guidance, we can call it that perhaps, for public records requesters. And that's a mouthful, but let me know what you think, or if anyone wants to put forth a motion. And oh, sorry, let me just say as an additional caveat, I still also am in favor of fact finding to get to model policies. I don't think we necessarily have to land on yes or no right now or make that part of the motion, but it's definitely something I'm going to bring up again as we start to flesh this out if we get the council's approval. And I'm sure Steve will return to this as well, so we could sort of figure out the details on that later. So if that all made sense, what does everybody think?
Yeah, I mean, just for my 2 cents, I just get the impression that having some sort of best practices is something that we could chew on, and it's something that we could, like Les says, might actually be able to accomplish. I think that, if there'd been will in the legislature to fund those data, requests and getting that data of how many requests are being made and all of that. I think that would have been wonderful, but it would be too much for our body to take on, and it sounds like it's too much for the office to take on. So those are kind of my thoughts. Yeah.
At least now, it's aspirational, but in the 23-25 budget cycle, when my office, goes and asks for its own budget before the legislature, there will be an ask for 2 additional FTE. One of those FTE is meant for public records analysts who would sort of work on these larger projects, and it's possible at that time, we might have the bandwidth either on our own or working in conjunction with the council to make this happen. I don't know DAS's timeline for getting their public records system online, but once it is, or if it is, when it is, some of that will start happening at the state level anyway, at least within the executive branch. So that'll be helpful. We'll start getting this information that maybe can inform our future work as well. But yeah, I think for the time being, we sort of keep it narrow and keep it to what we could actually accomplish like within 2 years, like Les said, if not sooner. Steve?
Yeah, and if
oh, sorry, go ahead, Shasta.
Just, if the Secretary of State can redo that audit, or maybe we take forward to the full council like a formal recommendation that they do that. I don't know how that all works, but I think that sounds great.
Yeah, I'm eager to hear what Molly reports back, for sure. Steve?
So maybe Adam, tell me, or maybe offhand, can the chair make a motion, or does he need somebody else?
I always thought the chair couldn't, which is why I haven't, but I've just been mimicking other people.
So it's totally open and allowable. Sometimes it's open with chair so moves. In Roberts, you need a second. In Mason's, the chair can just move and then you can vote. But now
Okay.
now know more about its preceding history than you probably know.
No, I'm glad to learn it.
Me too, Adam.
What I was going to say was, if that becomes a motion, I just to wordsmith it a little bit. Can we talk about the goal being toward developing guidance on best practices and policies?
So the goal, it would be developing guidance on best practices and policies for public records requesters, right? Policies doesn't really apply, but if we're going for one broad motion here. Okay, so I'm writing developing guidance on best practices and policies for public records requesters and I'll say public records custodians.
Seconded.
Go ahead, Adam. Oh, you said seconded, sorry. Wait, I don't think I actually said it. Don't shake my already rocky confidence in doing this, please. Okay, so I am moving that the first concept that this subcommittee adopts to recommend back to the full council that we proceed with developing upon their approval is developing guidance on best practices and policies for public records requesters and public records custodians. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. The second and final concept I am moving that we adopt is recommending to the full council that the Public Records Advisory Council have an annual meeting to be held in or around October of every year to coincide with when our last full annual meeting occurred, during which time the council will review its progress so far in the previous year and restate its goals for the coming year, and that this should occur annually. If that makes sense, do I have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
This may be late to ask about this, but I'm wondering whether, I guess Mark and Emily can hash this out, but would that meeting make sense to occur in October? Like kind of like since we just did this table setting kind of exercise in October, would next October be the next logical time to do it?
I mean, it's within a year, but if if people have concerns about either the usefulness of that time of year or its intersection with other events, I could withdraw my motion, or we could amend it for a different time of year.
It seems like something that the PRAC can figure out as a group.
So maybe I will put forth this amended motion that the PRAC have an annual meeting as stated for those goals already stated at a time that the PRAC decides is most expedient, the full PRAC. And with that amendment, do you still second, Adam?
Still do.
Thank you. All in favor of the amended motion?
Aye.
All opposed? Great. Well, that carried as well. So, I think we're in a good place then to report back to the PRAC about what we've done and how we think we should move forward. I would like, assuming the PRAC is in favor of some version of what we've proposed, I would like to get another meeting on the books if possible in December to just sort of get to work on these action items, even if we're just meeting to say, hey, let's meet, later and really flesh this out, or establish some sort of useful framework moving forward. I could do a doodle poll. Some people hate doodle polls. Since there's only 5 of us, we could pick a date now if possible. I am going to be out of town for a good chunk of the last part of December, but if maybe we could get in the week after the PRAC meeting, if that works for everybody.
Could I offer another suggestion, and totally open to be voted down or shouted down on this one? What do you think about, instead of having a meeting in December, we would take the time we otherwise normally would and just review the DAS model policy on public records stuff. Just take the time, take a couple hours, read through it, read what you like, what you don't like, that kind of stuff. You'll see a couple attachments on the back end about that tries to lay out a process, but I think that might be a good starting place to try to figure.
December's a big month.
Yeah, December is tough. And the legislative subcommittee is already going to be meeting at least once in December as well. So time is tight. It could be a short meeting because I think it's important that we just sort of get our marching orders right, because we don't really have a lot of time together to do this work. We have to do this during public meetings. Some of it, if we're drafting a document, you could respond to me individually with your edits. So there will be that in between time where we could work this out. But I don't think it's a bad idea to just sort of like take in as a group what the full council decided and at least maybe get a little bit of the basics down, even if it's a quick meeting, like I said, to say, okay, we're going to come back together later. I do recommend everyone read the DAS policy. Adam, you should know I use Exhibit C in my trainings all the time. I really like the way DAS tried to walk through the steps of how you determine if you're going to offer a fee waiver reduction. It's one of the few breakdowns I've seen that sort of covers all the bases. So I do like it. But I'm still in favor of trying to meet at least only once. I'm not going to say at least, only once in December. But yeah, I want to hear what everybody else thinks about that as well.
I think Adam's got the right idea. Like spending time doing research or reading probably would be really productive. One thing that the legislative committee set out was, I think, basically in the near term to try and develop kind of a research agenda and an agenda for steps that we want to take to proceed toward developing legislation. And that includes figuring out who they want to invite in for fact finding. So maybe that could be part of our goal, like developing a document like that by way of email or something like that. I guess I'd be open to a short meeting too, but I am mindful that we have another legislative and full PRAC meeting and the holidays and so forth.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot. Shasta?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first public body that I've been on, so part of what I'm struggling with here is I think so much better in writing than I do in like meetings like this. So I will need some guidance on like what's allowed as far as emailing back and forth and stuff. So I think that, you know, researching the STAS policy, seeing what kind of ideas I have on what could be different, and then I don't know how to then present it to the rest of the subcommittee. So if it has to be at a meeting, then yeah, we should have a meeting.
Yeah, well, definitely in between meetings, you don't, you know, hit reply all when attempting to communicate about the subcommittee or the full PRAC. Just send your messages directly to either me or to Mark Landauer as the chair. And but if you have agenda items you're interested in, you could let either me or Mark know about them. If there's written materials that go along with those agenda items, you know, we need to provide notice if we're going to be discussing them to the extent possible, like documents. So you could also include those ahead of time. And those are kind of the basics that you need to be concerned about. Any individual questions you could always just direct to me and I could either answer or get an answer for you about them as well. But the biggest thing is, you know, don't have sort of running conversations with other members. Like if we have a conversation, don't take what we talked about and then go talk to another member, because then that becomes a serial conversation, kind of things like that.
In Shasta, just so you know, as a new board and commission member, I think you're in Workday now, and there's a training for all the new folks that's in Workday about some of these bits and pieces. I don't know if you've already had a chance to take it, but if not, I'm happy to send you the link to.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
Good point, Adam. Yeah, if you haven't been notified yet, you will be notified of these mandatory trainings, and they can be pretty helpful. And of course, you could always peruse the Attorney General's Public Records and Meetings Manual. It's not quite like stereo instruction, so you should get at least some useful ideas out of it.
I mean, I do have some background.
I know you do. I know you do. But just these kinds of specific questions.
Yeah, totally.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm hearing no December meeting, which is fine. We can all go and sort of do our homework. So then are we talking January meeting? Because we do have the short session that'll be starting, in February? So it'd be nice to get a meeting in and start building a framework of how we want to proceed before that.
Yeah, I'm okay with the meeting that week that you were talking about, but I was just saying, like, I don't know how to, like, I will have to do some thinking and writing first. So whether that's then I present it at that meeting or what. I don't know.
Yeah, generally, I mean, certainly any agenda items that you want specifically, reach out ahead of time, but then yes, you know, the floor will be yours when you want to talk about it at the next meeting as well. And that's really sort of the only opportunity we have to discuss the ideas that any of us want to bring up, for sure. Yeah. Steve?
January 11th sounds good to me. I'm wondering whether, do we want, while we're still convened here, to set like kind of like if the goal is to do research and writing, like, do you want to have a specific ask of members to deliver to you before that meeting?
I think that's a potentially good idea. So if we're talking about how to better inform the public and public record bodies about best practices, public bodies about practices, best practices and policies, yeah, start thinking about, number one, what are like your top ideas for doing that? Are we talking about fact finding, model policies, just sort of like standardized guidance, whatever you think are the best delivery mechanisms for this concept? Please, you know, start sort of fleshing those out and sending me your ideas when you're ready before the next meeting. What ideas you think need further research would be a second item, and including maybe the best ways to do that research individually, as a council. Do we ask outside experts, etc.? Anything else you could think of, Steve, or anybody else to add to that?
I guess I'm thinking if we want to have people in to talk to us, maybe now's the time to start identifying them, because it takes time to line those things up. And we probably want to do it at the front end of the process.
Yeah, and you could do that either as a separate action item or as part of the research ideas, for sure. So that's 3 bits of homework you all have. If you want to and have the opportunity and feel comfortable putting it in writing, please send those to me directly and I will collect them in advance of the next meeting. So again, they're how best to educate public records requesters and public bodies about best practices in the public records law, what areas or issues need to be further researched in order to do our work, and third, which public bodies, if any, you think should come before us and provide information on any of these topics as well. And we have a suggestion of January 11th as our next meeting. So everybody check your calendars, please. Let's see. Okay, so I think this 1 to 3 time works best for me. Shasta, it sounds like that would work for you too. Is that true? Steve, would that work for you?
I'm sorry, I misspoke. I didn't realize it's a Tuesday. Tuesdays are, I mean, I can miss it, but Tuesdays are usually my jam day. So
different day of that week that works for you?
Yeah. Thursdays and Fridays are usually better.
Okay, that works for me too, around the same afternoon time period. We're getting, Thursdays are great, afternoons are better. So I propose the next meeting of the non-legislative subcommittee is Thursday, January 13th from 1 to 3 p.m. Do I need a second?
Hey, I'm really sorry. I can't make that day. I'll be traveling with the secretary. I could do Friday, but I can't do that Thursday.
Okay. Amended to Friday the 14th, 1 to 3 p.m. I think a simple thumbs up or yes will work.
Is there any way to do 1:30 or 2?
Works for me.
Works for me.
1:30, is that pushing it, Shasta? Would you prefer 2?
Yeah, 2 would be great.
Okay. Amended, Friday, January 14th, 2 to 4 p.m.
Awesome.
Thumbs up or
Thanks, guys.
yes? Shasta's good, Adam's good, Steve's good, I'm good. Molly?
Yep, that works.
Excellent. Our next meeting is January 14th, 2 to 4 p.m. I will send out the link and all the details in advance. Great. And Les, I hope you'll join us.
Well, I'll probably stay out of your way, and I just wanted to say I appreciate everyone's work on this and look forward to the work that's coming, and I'll be up in the stands applauding loudly.
Les, thank you so much for everything you've done, the creation of this council, this office. I know you've been part of the conversation for a long time and will continue to do so. We've benefited immensely from your insight, and I hope we will continue to be able to do so into the future. So thank you. And thank you, everybody. Welcome, Shasta. It was a good meeting. We're ahead of schedule, so go off, enjoy your lives. The recording will be up soon, and reach out with your ideas when you have them. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.